talk a little bit about who's influenced you most as a writer?
As a writer, well, I often come back to Andrea Dunbar and the Arbor, and I think what it is about her writing is that absolute immediacy of voice. That is real. And I'm not doing that because it's not my voice on the page, but what she constantly calls me back to is the importance of real listening and overhearing and just really tuning into the group that you're with or with young people. Sort of notebooks are tremendously important for writers. But she is the lesson to me about immediacy of voice, real voice, it's not about mimicry, but just about finding something true, I think. And it also gets you away from your own voice in a way. Some writers search for their own voice through their writing, don't they? Whereas I think I'm more about finding different things.
So that very skill that you have to kind of pick and appropriate different voices from outside of yourself, do you think that's what makes you so sort of have the affinity with writing for young audiences?
I think the thing about writing is also sort of stepping back and looking at the rhythm of the thing as a whole and being able to knit it all together and make things rhythmically interesting. I mean, that was something about Burn, I think. Having worked with young people, I saw that there was a tremendous willingness to work with something that's rhythmic, or that's got a lyric voice, or sort of they don't mind them. This scene's got this tone, and then there'll be something else completely different. And I think writing plays for adults, that's not the case. Or maybe I feel constrained writing for adults. I think writing for young people is much more. It can be much more imaginative, and I think they're much more open to just go here.
In terms of the audiences?
Yes, and also performers as well, in a way.
So, Deborah, can you define, when you're writing for young audiences, and you can say from the very young to teenagers, and then maybe writing for an adult audience, do you define any differences, or can you discern any differences in your approach to the play?
I think it's a willingness to be in their world.
In young people's world?
In young people's world is to leave your own behind, I think, your own commentary behind, and try to explore through them. It's about having fun in their world, in a way, I think. A preparedness to do that. Sort of what is fun for somebody who's 4 is different to. And grown-ups, I don't know, I mean, grown-ups are a bit of a closed book to me, because I do have to say that even when I'm writing plays for adults, I always have young people in them. And that's partly because young people are very much part of my world, and sometimes I look at plays and I find it rather odd that we seem to have a West End full of plays about grown-ups and there's not a young person in sight, whereas actually, they are there, they are part of our world, and they're what we should be thinking about.
So Burn was a connections play,
yes.
Which is plays that are commissioned to be performed by youth theatres or young performers. And I was just wondering, what the experience for you of watching Burn, how was it different, what was the same?
It was fascinating, actually, sort of, because when Burn went out in the connection scheme, I think I saw 6 productions, but I have to say it was so fantastic. If I ever got another play in connections, I would see as many as possible. I really would bust the gut to get to see as many as possible, because it is fantastic to see your play grabbed by a different set of people in a different landscape, and they've made it into their own. It's just the best thing, just the best thing. And there, because of course they were younger actors, it felt very close to them. So one of the differences when it moved into being played by professional actors was that they are actually slightly older than the people they're playing, and that's quite interesting, because of course they've got more, and because they're trained, they have a slightly more heady approach to it, and a more theoretical approach to it, and they're dissecting it more, as when it's done by youth theatres, there's a bit more of a gut sort of, oh, that's so and so. There's a common knowledge about who people might be using as their models. In the performance of Burn, I don't know whether you saw it in the Cottesloe.
No, I went the night that
was amazing. It was almost operatic. I had never dreamt of it being like that. Sort of the music that was in it, the size of it. I didn't feel as connected to that because it had been through that big process, I suppose, as when I went and saw it in the village hall, and there were recognisable kids to me. That I think in the professional production, I was asked some quite tricky questions sometimes, and I also had to provide research or help people through things that actually the kids themselves in youth theatres just got on and did because they were closer to that age.
Could you tell us a bit about your experience in collaborating with young people in developing a new piece?
I've just done a play with the Brit School called Something for the Winter, and the Brit School has a year 13 kind of theatre company who are commissioned a play each year, and I was asked to write the play this year, and the way we did that was Susanna Gould, who is the director, asked the actors to each produce a half-hour workshop for the other actors on something an aspect that interested them, something that they were interested in, that they would quite like their play to be about. Where we are in time and where we are in place in Croydon and in London, and a year after the riots, which still aren't wrapped up or fully understood, that it would be wrong not to do that. And there was one woman who had been very interested, one young woman who had been very interested in doing that because she lived in Croydon, and she described how it was waiting for the evening to come and the precautions they had to take to protect their home. And so then, having decided that, I also looked at the things that the other people had been interested in and tried to give those to the characters that I wrote for them. So one young woman had wanted to write, to do a piece about photography, and so I made her into somebody who was going out and taking pictures. She had a speech about being sucked into that thing about taking pictures, about wanting to record it, actually get it down, this is my moment in history. And so I tried to incorporate things that they were interested in, and then I would also be sparked by things that I had overheard and noted down, and I would come in and say, okay, you said this, can you improvise a scene? What happens when? And we improvised parties and kind of boy-girl things. And what was also very useful to me was I devised a questionnaire that went out to the school, and people filled in and gave back anonymously. And because it was anonymous, people wrote things that they might not have said to my face. So I had a completely different kind of catalogue there of people's experience of what had gone on in the riots and how they had been spoken to, whether they'd been or knew people who had been. And that was a tremendous resource for me as well. So that was really useful. So it is kind of about asking people to improvise things, asking them about their lives, collecting information from anonymous sources, also reading up about the riots on the web, anything I could get my hands on.
Is there a sort of challenging commission or project that you've had as a writer that you want to talk about that you can tell us? Because I sometimes think talking about the successes is great, but I think sometimes talking about the challenges is where we really learn things. Is there?
Yes, I mean there's kind of two big challenges. One was the commission for the National, which I found really difficult. But I was a very beginning writer then. Burn was my first play that I'd written completely by myself, and was my first piece of proper writing. So, and the play that I started writing for the National, I know I will write one day. It will stay with me as long as I live. I still know it is, that's my purgatory. The other one, my big challenge recently was to write a play for 65 people, a community piece, and that was quite daunting, really, because you know, sort of the big cast thing is there with youth theatre, you know, sort of, but I hadn't written for more than 13 people, really. So, and to have 65 people was, you know, sort of, I think first of all you think about, well, what, the patterning, you know, how am I going to pattern this? And is it going to be a family story about family through the ages? You know, sort of, am I going to incorporate 65 people like that, or will I have strong enough actors who can go all the way through? And eventually what I settled on was a kind of stained glass window, really, because I wanted to give everybody a moment, but you don't want to overburden anybody. You're writing for 65 people who are an unknown quantity, and I suppose the art there, or the craft there of it, was to make a piece that has that has a rhythm to it, so it goes from, it has a beginning and an end, but has kind of focused moments where you've got just 2 or 3, and then big moments as well, that's sort of your choral stuff. But I do love that. I do, and Byrne has that, I suppose, as well, that kind of choral quality. I think if you've got 12 people, why not have 12 people on stage at once?
Yeah. You talk about stained glass and that sort of visual metaphor for your structure. Is that something that's quite important for you?
I think I do work quite visually in a way. I've kind of, as I've progressed, I found mind maps are really helpful to me, rather than linear lists, to actually see the thing exploded like this. Is my brain seems to like it. You know, sort of, I like to work a lot with big sheets of paper, and get things everywhere so I can see them, and I think actually visual material is quite evocative and can set you off, can't it? It is about finding out what sets off your imagination as well, isn't it? The least part of writing happens in the room. In a way, you know, sort of the collection is all outside, for me.
Could you offer a top tip or any piece of advice you would give to a writer who maybe is curious or interested but hasn't quite started, or is just starting out writing for young audiences?
I think for me it would be to get in contact, to find a youth theatre group, and actually, you know, sort of go along. If you're young enough, join it. You know, sort of find out what acting is about, what directing is about. I think that is invaluable, to know about stagecraft from different angles. You know, experience acting. It may not be for you, it doesn't matter, but you know, but to actually, if you've got access, if you can get access to a youth theatre group, and start to write bits for them and get them to try things out, get them to read it, I think that can be immensely helpful. You don't have to be young to do it. I hope that's what Seeing Me will sort of give to some people, because I think at the moment, I think you can always start writing. It's never too late to start writing.
And what about writing for young audiences?
I also think that, as long as you've got contact with them, that's, for me, that was one of the things that I thought about when I was coming here. You know, when you asked about pathways, and I think I will always write for young audiences, and then I thought, but I will only write for young audiences and young people as long as I have contact with young audiences and young people, I think. I think that's because they are what inspire me, and they are how I know it's got a bit of truth to it. You know, sort of, I think that's probably, it's about contact for me. Yeah.